Cool. Enjoy.
Thank you.
Thank you. Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the 5th IIBA SA webinar. This is an initiative that has been introduced during the COVID-19 period to ensure that business analysts can still stay connected during this time. The IIBA South African chapter is the home for all business analysis practitioners, and IIBA supports the business analysis community through events, webinars, meetups, and professional development days, as well as the BA Summit. Please do visit the IIBA website and all the social media platforms to keep up to date with all the events that are happening, and also see the different certifications that are on offer. The session will be recorded and sent out to everyone. Today we are proud to present Katlego Thaba, who will be speaking on today's single most important skill. Katlego is a seasoned public speaker and actuary by profession. He currently works as a consulting actuary and manager at an advisory firm with a global footprint. He has spoken at various events such as the BA Summit last year. He's delivered keynotes at the 2 South African banks, and he's also spoken on the radio station Metro FM. Just a few house rules. Katlego will be presenting for about 40 minutes, and then we'll open up for questions afterwards. You can type questions during the session in the chat, but we'll only have a Q&A session at the end of this session. I hope everyone enjoys the session. And please stay muted during the whole session so that we don't disturb the speaker. Thank you, and I'll just hand over to Katlego now. Thanks.
Thank you, Nozipo. Just give me a quick confirmation from your side if my presentation looks fine, Nozipo.
It does, thank you.
Perfect, great. Thank you and welcome to everyone who has joined in for today's webinar, especially for all of you who are already here, for being here on time. It's good to be with all of you. I want to firstly, before we go into the talk, just appreciate the team at the IIBA SA who invited me for this talk, who have helped me in terms of just letting me know what the procedure will be for us to get here and sending out the invitations, the marketing. It's a lot of work. So I've worked with Nozipo, I've worked with Larissa, I've worked with Yassine and a number of others. So to all of you guys and ladies, I say a good job has been done. Thank you for making today a possibility. And most importantly, thank you for inviting me. The honor is all mine. Now, for people who have joined in for this session today, I think some of you are probably just waiting for the time where I answer the question of what is today's single most important skill, and maybe you're going to drop off. But I hope that once you get that answer, you will not drop off, because I feel like there's some good and rich content for you to engage. And at some different points in time during the webinar, I will ask you to participate by making your contributions in the chat box. Please do so, interact, and make it lively. So it's good to be with you. My name is Katlego Thaba, as Nozipo has said. When Nozipo told me that this session that I have to present is 35 minutes, I was shocked. I was like, gee whiz, I'm a Christian and I'm a preacher. In preaching, 35 minutes is basically when the sermon starts. It's the first time that I will say things like, I'm about to close. And then at 50 minutes, I'm saying the second, I'm about to close. And at 1 hour, that's where I start saying things like, can I preach? So it's been very fascinating to be part of this, but I have absolutely enjoyed preparing for this talk. Now, you guys are primarily business analysts, and I thought I should start off by giving something a bit nostalgic. We can no longer be together, and it's sad. And so last year I was with you, for those of you who were at the Southern Africa Summit in Cape Town, and just wanted to maybe remind you of that, when we could still be socially close and a bit more intimate than today. This was last year. I was at the summit and I was speaking there. I absolutely enjoyed meeting all of you and engaging and interacting with all of you. But it's no longer a possibility. Things like this, moments like these, However, we remain hopeful that things will change. And also, things have changed since last year. That was September. What has changed then since last year? I thought maybe I should share this because sometimes you must flex a little bit. If you don't know, and you're a business analyst in South Africa, I don't want to say anything that might discourage you, but the guy right at the back there is your president for IIBA SA. And the moral of this picture and this story is to say, take as many selfies as possible. You never know when they can translate into value. So this was when I was with Edward Ngubane and Nyasha, who helped me to come to the summit and speak at the summit last year. Now, this picture I thought I should include for just a different reason altogether, because of what I'm holding in my left hand. That's one of the most important things in South Africa today. Do you know why? Because people are thirsty and it is alcohol in there. And do you know also why? Because I live in an apartment where it's an apartment of one person and no one in my apartment really is interested in these sort of things. And so I happen to still have those exact two, thirst quenching things that many South Africans would really love to get a hold of. But it's a reality that we are facing. Things have changed. And stuff like this suddenly have value. Now let's get into the talk. I hope you are still tuned in, you're still enjoying yourself, and you're still engaging. This talk really about today's single most important skill came to me in January 2020. So I was invited to give a keynote speech, an address at the Small Enterprises Development Agency up there in Pretoria. And when I got there, it was on the fourth industrial revolution. I thought about this. I'm like, there are all these skills. There's the Internet of Things, there's AI, there's blockchain, there's robotics, there is nanotechnology, biotechnology. And we see a confluence of all of these technologies that are advancing at rapid paces at the same time. And so now it raises the question to say, what can I focus on? If everything around me is changing so fast, what can I focus on? And so I want to give you this question. Suppose that you are a mother or a father of a 16-year-old. The child is finishing off, let's say, high school, heading into varsity. And they come to you and they say, Mommy, or they say, Daddy, I would like to know from you because I have confidence in you, Daddy or Mommy. Things are changing and they're changing fast. What is the one skill that you can tell me to work on with all my effort, with all vigor, to make sure that 5 years and 10 years from now, that effort will bear fruit. That skill will still be relevant. And they're asking you this question. And now, at this point in time, I'm going to ask you to say, what would be your answer? And please share your answers in the chat box. I'm just going to try and check in the chat box what kind of responses we are getting. Let's see what people think they would tell their kid. So I'm just going to be browsing. Learn to unlearn. That is Yasin. Like that. Someone is enjoying it, is saying it's great to be here. That's good. I'm glad. Prabhashini is saying resilience. That's powerful. I mean, there's a lot of change. If you can't be resilient, will you be able to survive? Maybe no. Nadine is saying adaptability. Someone is greeting Jeremy. Hi, Jeremy. Okay, so resilience is seemingly a popular one. Sani is saying public speaking. Yes, you're saying adapt to change, adaptability, agility. I'm clearly in the midst of business analysts. When you hear words like adaptability, agility, you know that you are surrounded by business analysts. Hugo is saying decision making. Chifiwa is saying find your purpose. Wow, that's profound. Even now, I'm starting to wonder, what is my purpose? Emotional intelligence by Douglas, growth mindset, people skills, flexibility, people skills, it was by Mana. Alayson said growth mindset. Ndaten Guvani, I see you've joined us, and he's saying adaptability, the president himself, and Mpo. All right, so I've had your responses, and I got similar responses, different responses to an extent in some cases than what I had previously. And now, this is the reason for the talk today, because we have this quite wide variety of skills that we all believe are essential, paramount, important for us and for an individual to have and possess going into the future. To a point that you can tell this to your 16-year-old boy or girl and say, with all your might, just learn adaptability. With all your might, just learn people's skills. With all your mind, just learn. There was one, agility. And so the skills have come through. So now, let me come to what my view on this skill is. The skill is foundationed on the reality of our time. And the reality of our time is a reality of change. Change is everywhere. And I love what I put together here. And I said, in the heart of change, there tends to be constancy. During great times or times of great uncertainty, there tends to be certainty. And this was quite a profound epiphany for me when I learned about storms, you know, the likes of your tornadoes, the likes of your hurricanes, about how in the heart of a storm, in the center of a storm, there tends to be the eye of the storm. And do you know what is interesting about the eye of the storm? It is apparently the calmest place in the storm. That was a fascination for me. And so our job is to say, we are surrounded by great factors of change. We are seeing megatrends that are affecting the way life is and how we engage, interact, communicate today. So what is constant? Because if we can identify that which is constant, we can leverage off that knowledge, that understanding, and make the most of that because we can depend on it. Listen to this, what this one CHRO once said. She said, we are focused on the formidable challenge of attracting, developing, and retaining employees with skills we haven't yet determined. I read that, I was like, that is crazy. How then do you even know who to approach? How do you know what to do? How do you even know if you have the right skill set in your organization? Because you haven't even determined the skills. But ladies and gentlemen, this is the condition, and these are the conditions we are living in today. This is why this one skill soars and is important above all other skills for me. And the skill is the ability to learn. The ability to learn. When you look at the environment we are in, COVID-19 is one example. You know, COVID-19 is different. It has led to unprecedented responses from governments, from organizations, from individuals, because of the uncertainty and the speed at which we saw the uncertainty. But the reality is it presented nothing new. The sort of conditions that COVID brought about are nothing new. But it has accelerated the need for organizations to learn. There are some organizations today that don't possess the ability to learn. Just imagine how they're trying to even make sense of the environment they find themselves in of COVID-19. Think about a restaurant. Suppose you had just founded this groundbreaking restaurant last year in January, where your primary focus was the experience that people got when they came to your premises and they dined with you. If you cannot learn and adapt to change, if you do not have the ability to learn and change to the new environment of COVID-19, it probably means to this day you still cannot trade. But on the other side, you're still probably paying rent, right? And so your very existence as a business might be threatened just because you do not possess the ability to learn. It becomes imperative for you to understand that maybe you need to move to even e-commerce approaches, online sales approaches, of being able to distribute the very food that you prided yourself in, that you were selling through experience and having people at your premises. So the ability to learn is a skill for me that cuts across industries. Every single industry is being ravaged by the mega trends of change that are pushing forward change. Regardless of whether you're in engineering, regardless of whether you're in financial services, regardless of whether you're in demography, whether you are in America, across the geographies, this skill has become the most important. And I want to challenge you and say it's not only the most important skill today, In fact, it has been the most important skill to date in recent times. For a few decades, I would even argue. And this is the premise upon which my talk has emerged. When I gave that talk at CEDA, the Small Enterprises Development Agency, it forced me to think. That's why I love giving talks, because they forced me to learn. The ability to learn has become important. This entire talk here that I'm giving, I crafted it from the point when Larissa contacted me a month ago to say, let me put together this talk, because I had conceptualized it. I needed to learn and find some research material that can support my content so that I can give it. And that's why it's important. And in fact, I had to spend a lot of time over the past few days and weeks streamlining the content. Why? Because it was just too much. You know, it reminded me and made me feel like Shoma Josie when she says, it's too much. But let me not digress. Let me not digress. We are amongst important people here. So, the ability to learn, or learning ability. I'm going to use this story or this guy who's going to show you why learning ability is important. In early 2020, this individual and friend of mine said about wearing masks, I won't do it. Later on in 2020, around April, he said, well, I don't want to wear one myself. I'm feeling good. You might know him, and he might be a friend of yours too. That is Mr. Donald Trump himself, the President of the United States of America. But you see, last year, maybe I had a different perspective, or the way I presented Mr. Donald Trump at the summit was a lot more humorous. But today, at least, I'm recognizing a skill that he possesses. And that is the skill of learning ability, the ability to learn. Because look at this, ladies and gentlemen. In July, just a few months later, this is what Mr. Trump said. Actually, I think I look better in a mask. He had seen, learned, and understood that learning, or rather masks, are very important. And he was able to correct himself. Not only that, he put it into practice. Now he wears a mask. In fact, he wears a very nice mask with the logo for the President of the United States of America. So let's get into the what. We'll get into the when. We'll get into the how, the why as well of learning ability, or the ability to learn. When I conceptualize it and I place it in a learning format, this is how I see the ability to learn, or learning ability. It comprises of three primary parts. At the very base of this pyramid that makes and comprises the ability to learn is this point on identify. And it speaks to identifying the learning that you need to make. Many people just don't identify learning at all. And that is sad. Imagine if you don't sit and take some time out to say and ask yourself as an organization, as a business analyst, to say, what do I need to learn for the current project, but also for some projects that you might get into in the future? It is highly unlikely that you will learn. And in fact, if you don't identify and do the work of prioritizing this, whittling out the noise and cutting through the noise and establishing what it is that your organization must learn, what it is that you as an individual must learn, you might end up starting with learning, joining learning programs, whether online, Coursera, Udemy, or going to structured programs like MBAs, and only at the end of your learning realize that you have learned the wrong thing. It is that story of an individual who's climbing a ladder, puts in all the effort, climbs this ladder on this very tall rise building. The problem is when they get to the top of the building, they realize they climbed the wrong building. So identification is a critical stage for your learning. If you are not investing the time to identify what learning interventions you need for yourself, for your organizations, and your organization, you are taking a risk that you will learn the wrong things just because of the forces around you and the propelling that you endure from the expectation that you must just learn something. The second part of it, of this pyramid for me, is what I call design. You've identified the learning structures and interventions that you need. But now what you must do is to design your learning approach and your learning program. Many people identify the learning and they leave it there. You just recognize the learning. If you don't do anything about it, it's not gonna happen by itself. It's not magic. Learning is something that you must be proactive about. And the proactive step that you must take here is to be very particular in designing your learning approach. You know that you need to learn, let's say, public speaking. You need to say, okay, what is the most effective way in which I can become a better public speaker? You don't just go out maybe and start giving talks. You don't just go out and join the next organization you see online when you Google public speaking. But maybe you consult a bit and then you start realizing that, okay, you're going to have a few individuals, 2 or 3 individuals that are your mentors, that are going to support you on your journey. You're going to join a reputable organization like a Toastmasters or whatever speaking organization you might know. And then you realize that maybe you must supplement your knowledge with some online content that already exists. And then maybe you also realize that some videos of public speaking help you learn when you see people learn. And then additionally, you might identify that recording yourself when you give public talks helps you to learn, because we learn a lot more from reflection. Most of us fail to learn because we don't incorporate reflection. And so you have what you've just done in that thinking and in that framework is created and designed a mechanism that helps you achieve the objective of learning, and not just learning the skills you identified in the base. And finally, at the very top of the pyramid is effecting the learning. I like what Nike says. It says, just do it. The problem is this: we have many individuals that can identify that, you know what, I need to learn a little bit about programming. I need to learn a little bit about blockchain, because I'm in insurance. It probably is going to disrupt a number of things in my industry. I need to learn a little bit about the Internet of Things, about AI. But if you never do it, even if you structure it and say, okay, there's this course that Udemy gives, there is this person and friend of mine that I can have conversations with, if you never effect it, the learning never and will not happen. And so it is very important that you put together the structure and you effect every step with precision. One last example before we move on. I was giving this example. You see, if you wanted to learn the skill of swimming and all you did, maybe you identified it. Let's say we give you a tick on that. But in your design phase, you don't incorporate the right things. You just do the theory. You watch videos and you even practice in the air, the strokes, the breaststroke, whatever the strokes are. But you never have in your design a part where you go into the water. Your learning approach and design is just fundamentally flawed. Yes, you might be invited to come to the Olympics, the swimming Olympics, but the problem is this: the big news that will come out of your race will not be that you won the championship as an underdog. It will be that you have reached your untimely death. Yes, they have, Seiko and all the other timers there, but it will still be untimely because you did not deserve to die. Learning ability and structuring your learning properly could have avoided that. Let's put on the burners a bit. I'm going to give you a break, and I call it an O2 break. O2 represents oxygen. It's just for you to breathe. Don't go anywhere. Online people tend to say, "Skaba hemisha," but I'm not that person. I'm your good guy. I give you some breathing space. And to do that, let's go into a few quotations on learning ability, right? And I'm going to just skip the slide and we might come back to it. Here are the quotations. Desire the ability to learn so that you can remain employable for the long term. This was by Mara Swan, EVP Global Strategy and Talent at Manpower. We always were living with this paradigm that any technology skill set is temporary. Our interview process, in our selection process, we've always preferred the person with a learnability more than the person with just existing technical expertise. That was Sandeep. The important thing here is to see that people across the world are recognizing the importance of an individual possessing the ability to learn. Another quote from the letters.com says, "Change is constant in today's workplace. To keep up, you need to keep learning. Learning drives adaptability." It addresses some of the points that came through, and I think also Mr. Ngubane raised the point on adaptability. So learning gives you the charge and empowers you even with that learning. With a particular skill like adaptability. Those people who develop the ability to continuously acquire new and better forms of knowledge that they can apply in their work and to their lives will be the movers and shakers in our society for the indefinite future. That was Brian Tracy. I mean, that is profound. That is profound. Some more quotes as your mind keeps relaxing. As you drill up below hair, my insipid would say, I'm hemishing you, the English would say. Maybush.com says, if you want to craft a career where you are able to add value, feel fulfilled, and stay employed over the long term, then there's one skill that stands above all others. And that skill is being able to keep learning. So ladies and gentlemen, I'm putting to you that learning ability is the most important skill today. Not only for its own sake, but in fact, it enhances all the other skills you may need for all your other day-to-day work tasks, family tasks, and otherwise. So you need to invest in learning ability. When should you then effect learning? The when of learning ability. Proactivity is key. There are people who don't do anything about their learning. And it goes primarily into that base of our pyramid, the base of identifying what learning you need. So you must be proactive. Ideally as an individual, ideally as an organization, you want the majority of your learning to come through proactively, where you are looking into the market and say, I may not lose my job tomorrow if I don't learn AI, but for where I need to go, maybe I need AI. I may not lose my employees today if my organization does not improve our way of work, but maybe I need to learn to improve our way of work as an organization. So proactivity is key. You also want to have your learning happening continuously. Gone are the days where we hire as business, we invite a business analyst and we say to you as a BA, you know what, we want to learn this specific skill. Can you come up with, your diagrams that show us how the solution can flow, the timing can be done. Just come up with a project plan for us and we give it to you as a business analyst. You go and you run with it and you come back, voila, here's the solution, and you know how to spec it for the IT people and everything is sorted. We are no longer there. Learning must be continuous. It's no longer good enough for learning to be a one-off event or a project. It has to be continuous for yourself as an individual, as a professional, and for an organization. And that means sometimes you may not be doing proactive learning, but you might be having to do reactive learning. And reactive learning means that the day and age we live in is such that it's fraught with fast change and a lot of rapid change. You might be on a course where it's a 2-month course, and then in the second week, you realize that the things you're learning there have become obsolete because there's a new course. Then you need to stop and react to that. You might even have to cut your learning course halfway because you're realizing you're wasting your time. Or sometimes some skills that you thought are not important, you see from what the behaviors and reactions in the market are, that you must learn it. And so reacting to that becomes important. Reacting to that becomes imperative. So some of your learning will be outside what you do proactively, but it'll be in response to what you're seeing people do. I'm just gonna pause before I go to the next slide just to see what is going on in the chat box. Ruth, I see you're loving this. I'm glad and that you've been doing a lot of reactive learning recently. That is good. And I challenge you to take it further, one step further, to do some proactive learning. Someone said, how do we identify people with learnability? That is a good question. Maybe I might be invited for another webinar to answer that question. Or maybe you will learn it and you will give that talk. Was it Sally or Sani? So let's move on because time is of the essence here. Now, I'm not going to spend time on this. This is from Stephen Covey. I just put Sid Savara there because that's where I got the picture online. We must give people credit. But Stephen Covey came up with this framework. Most of our problems, as far as learning is concerned, is that we don't prioritize learning due to the fact that it's not urgent most of the time. I can survive one more day being an actuary who does not have wider skills. I can survive one more day being a business analyst who doesn't have any knowledge on maybe the latest data science developments, machine learning interventions. But there's a danger with that, because what we're seeing with COVID is that the world has found itself here, where certain things are both important and urgent. And that is a crisis, where if you haven't learned how to work remotely as an organization, and you're forced to, due to lockdown, to work remotely, that means working remotely for your organization has suddenly become urgent. But because you've not done the learning and you cannot learn quickly, you've not invested in a culture of learning, it's going to take you a very long time for you to acquire that ability to transition to remote working. So what you want to do is to move into this quadrant where things are not urgent. They may not be urgent, but you recognize that they are important. You've identified them as skills that you need for the future. You know, for example, annually, I take 3 days off at the beginning of each year. And I take those 3 days off to go on a retreat. And I analyze every area of my life, from my health to my spiritual life, to my career, to my public speaking. And I have actually learned a lot from this retreat. 3 days, I switch off, my devices are off, and I say, what have I learned? What has materialized over the past year? What have I not done well? How can I improve those areas? It creates a design of learning from that point to say, okay, I need to improve in terms of how much I'm marketing my public speaking. I've learned to build websites for myself. I built my own website personally because it came from the retreats. I've increased my presence on social media. It came from my retreats, from LinkedIn. There's a lot of my learning that comes from that. I have realized it is important to learn it, even though it may not be urgent. So I'm not going to spend much time here. I'm just going to encourage you to say there's a lot of opportunity to learn. If you're not using your device today to learn, you are wasting it. Your phone in particular. There's a lot of learning content you can leverage through your phone. If you're not using YouTube to learn and all you're doing on YouTube is things like baby shark, baby shark, baby shark, you're wasting time. If you are a mother of a child and you don't know what I'm singing, look, lockdown did not introduce quarantining or self-isolation for you. You have been self-isolating for a very long time because Daddy Shark, Daddy Shark, that is a very popular song on YouTube. So use YouTube for learning things that help you. And there's a lot of free content there. So I'm just gonna really move quickly through this. And I will tell you that use dynamic learning centers. It's not good enough to just get an old textbook and that's all you're using from learning. Use a mix of strategies, podcasts, use magazines, watch videos, use different things that introduce novelty, which encourages your ability to learn. And as a bonus for you guys as business analysts, you are involved with a lot of projects and you're doing a lot of project management work. And what I encourage you to do is that oftentimes you're exposed to multidisciplinary teams for your projects and use those as opportunities to learn. It is easier to learn something when it relates to what you're currently doing. So some of the times, get some of the members of your teams to tell you about their area of expertise, to tell you about what they're building, how have they learned those skills, what is happening in their industry. And they can share with the rest of the team and people will be interested because it is relevant to what you guys are doing on that given project. And so you start being proactive. The how part is really about capacity. And I don't want to spend too much time here. How to learn. If you do not create and possess capacity to learn, you will not learn. And that really comes from 3 things: time, money, and resources. Many people use the excuse that I don't have time to learn. And if you don't have time to learn, you will not learn. You must create the time to learn. You know, one of the things that, you know, Josh Kaufman, there's a video of his where he speaks about how it only takes 20 hours to learn a new skill. Check it out on YouTube, and I'll share some of these links with Larissa and the team that they can share with you guys as business analysts of the content that I've used in producing my material. But he says that the major barrier to skill acquisition isn't intellectual, it is emotional. Most of us are afraid of failing. One of the things that I've challenged myself is to never fear failing. Even where I see the chances of success being slim, if I believe that's something that I want to learn, I will go for it. And when I fail, I will say I've learned something and I'm going to do better the next time. So for yourself, you must not deprive yourself the opportunity to learn by not, you know, overcoming the fear or the failure barrier. Money. It's a lot more for organizations. Things are getting cheaper. We're seeing rapid advancements in technology. Accessibility is quicker. But for individuals, this should not be a big factor for you because things are free a lot more online. So you have capacity. The real big factor for you is time. So create the time and do the learning. IBM uses 3 strategies that it promotes around learning. It says, turn up the transparency. Make it clear in your organization, what are the new skills that you want to be employing people in, that you're seeing will be the focal point of your business in the future. And IBM does that through AI. And they in fact create a digital footprint for their employees, which helps them make it personal. You need to go granular than just saying, these are the general learning interventions that are available. IBM uses AI to give each of their individuals or rather employees their digital footprint, which then through insights prompts an individual to say, it looks like you don't have a lot of awareness in data science. Maybe do this course on data science. And that really is drastic because IBM in fact said in one of their statistics that about 5 years ago, 3 in 10 of their employees did not possess the skills needed for the future. But because of this AI intervention around learning, today, 8 in 10 of their employees possess the skills they need for the future. Lastly, look inside out. Some of the growth in terms of learning and in terms of solutions will come from the outside. So that is the house of learning. I've already mentioned this video by Josh Kaufman. So in the last 5 minutes, I'm going to really just touch on a few things that I feel you already believe, you already know, and you don't need me to justify them. You don't need me to promote them, but they are imperative. What are these things? It is the why of learning. Zig Ziglar once said this profound quote. He says, the only thing, ladies and gentlemen, worse than training people and having them leave your organization is not training them and having them stay. You will be stuck with people who have not been learning. You'll be stuck with people who cannot learn. And it is a lot more pervasive in our country where, you can't just fire somebody like that. And so it becomes important for you as an organization, as a business analyst involved in change, involved in where your organization is going, to invest in people's ability to learn within your organization. Why is it important to learn? Why is learning ability so important? Because VUCA is our reality. Bob Johansen really brought this idea into the business world, but it really emanated from the military science in America following 9/11, just the characterization of the climate that was prevailing at the time because of instability is what brought this term to life, VUCA, and it abbreviates volatility, uncertainty, complexity, and ambiguity. Look at the world today. That is the reality. And if you are not doing some work to ensure that you are learning, you will struggle to thrive in a VUCA environment, an environment of high volatility, high uncertainty, a lot of complexity, plenty of ambiguity. But when you are learning, you start being able to deal with this. You are able to craft visions because you are learning about what becomes important. The vision speaks to the foundation about identification. Around uncertainty, you are able to give clear, certain positions and stances you have as an organization. You're able to give and communicate with clarity, and deconstruct complex ideas. And around ambiguity, you can help people understand what is important, what matters to you, and what matters to your organization. A few statistics from OECD. They have an employment outlook that they do, and this is the 2019 one. They said orders of industrial robots have increased 3-fold in just a decade. They said the amount of private equity invested in artificial intelligence has doubled over the past year. This tells you why learning is important. Things are changing. They say employment in manufacturing has decreased by 20% over the past 2 decades, while employment in services grew by 27%. The World Economic Forum says 54% of employees will require significant reskilling and upskilling. So you can see that there are a lot of reasons why you must learn. And you cannot discount the fact that, in my view, today, this is the most important skill you can learn. And to wrap it up, I'll give you a 2-minute, 3-minute story. And this is the story of how learning became imperative. to an individual by the name of Madimeja and his crew. Madimeja grew up in a rural village in Limpopo, went to a poor school because his family could not afford to take him to a better school, financial difficulties. These are some real images, in fact, from his school. These are some of the colleagues from his school. What he did is identified that in his school, they were not being taught some chapters. For example, in mathematics, there were about 5 chapters in the maths curriculum that his school and his teacher never taught at all, at all. So in grade 11, they realized this and they said, we want to become people that can go to university. And in his case, he wanted to become an actuary. And he said, okay, UCT won't accept me if I don't get at least 80% in mathematics. And so they identified the need to develop those marks, getting at least 70% of the rest of his subjects. He designed a program, and that program involved some of these guys that you see on your screen. And he said, guys, let us start studying by ourselves extra hours and teaching ourselves the extra 5 or so chapters that our school is not teaching us. They started this in grade 11. And then they started going to other schools that had free programs during the week or during holidays, and they increased their learning in mathematics. When the matric results came, in case you don't know who Katlego Thaba is, this is Katlego Thaba. The matric results enabled him to go to UCT, where he graduated in record time. Not only graduated in record time, his average study actuarial science was 71%. In matric, his group of 4 people that he started with, they started learning together, teaching themselves how to learn. They were part of 12 learners in a school of 100 learners who qualified to go to university. In fact, only 50 learners in the school passed matric. There were 8 distinctions that the school obtained. 7 of those distinctions came from Katlego's team of 4 guys. And 6 of them came from actually Madimeja is his name. And now you will realize that if you haven't realized it, Madimeja is actually Katlego. Now, this previous picture might be confusing if you cannot recognize that I'm the individual. And I pardon you because lockdown is changing all of us. You know, we are a little fatter somewhere here. We are a little fuller somewhere in terms of our hair. But that is the reality. The reality says learning ability is the most important skill today. It demands a paradigm shift. Wherever you are, you can see the value of learning ability. I am able to give you this talk because I've invested in learning ability. From coming from the rurals, in those conditions, passing and being able to qualify to go to university, being able to learn how to adapt in a university environment, going in and then into the workplace, changing industries, changing locations, worked in Cape Town, worked in Johannesburg, being able to give talks to quite a wide range of audiences and learning to do that, for me has showed me that learning ability is the most profound skill you must learn. So in closing, adapting to current and future change should no longer be just projects. It should become a business as usual activity. Learning should become the norm. Our challenge is that we have consuming ability and not as much learning ability. Invest in your learning ability. It is important for you to create and maintain a learning plan as an individual and as an organization for your people. Be careful not just to not enroll for the sake of just getting credentials and titles, but do it for the sake of learning. Lastly, to close it off in terms of the question I started with, 40% or more of the jobs in 10 years' time may not exist yet. So how can you prepare for that? What can you do today to prepare for that? Learning ability. You can contact me for further conversations. I want to thank you for giving me your time. I really enjoyed preparing this talk. I learned a lot, and I hope you learned one thing, even if it is just one thing. For me, that is enough. So I'm just going to leave my contact details here. Contact me, reach out. Let's keep learning. Let's invest in our learning ability. And I'll hand over control back to Nozipo for Q&A. Thank you. Nozipo.
Thank you, Katlego. I really enjoyed listening to your talk. It was so informative, and I think everyone, seeing from the comments as well, everyone has enjoyed it. We'd like to start taking questions, and how we're going to do that is that I see some people started already posting some on the comment section. So we'll just on the chat. So we'll look at those. But what we're going to do is that we'll allow the person who's asking the question to actually unmute themselves and then pose the question. So let me just.
Fantastic.
I see Seni had a question. I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing your name correctly. And I think you touched on it earlier, but I can't see it now.
Maybe Seni can come in and ask the question if they still have it.
Seni, do you want to unmute yourself and maybe ask the question? Okay, we'll move on to the next question. I see there's a question from Kulu Meno. Kulu, do you want to unmute yourself and ask your question?
Hi, Nozipo.
Hi, Kulu.
Hi, everyone.
Hi, Mr. Mnala. Lovely to see you. Thank you for coming through.
Sure. Thanks, Mr. Thaba. Look, man, I was just thinking about learning, and I think, as I mentioned in the question I posed, is that we need to learn in a different way than machines learn. We need to learn in the stuff that only we as humans learn. So how can we distinguish ourselves and in our learnings something in a way that allows us to be more human and to always be ahead of the machine in a way? So that's my question.
Thank you. I got the question. That is a very good question, to say, how can we structure our learning such that it distinguishes us and we don't lose the essence of who we are and learn in the areas that are pertinent. You know, what is interesting when I've been doing my research, I think it was the World Economic Forum, highlighted, you know, if you did look at the outlooks around projected skills importance, a few years back, 5 years back, they were dominated by what we would term technical skills, you know, programming, coding, data science. But now the recent reports, 2019, 2018, what you're seeing and hearing from executives is where they are appreciating that actually the skills that they see as the most important today are what we would call behavioral skills. Skills about and the likes of public speaking, communication, problem solving, negotiating. And those are the skills that are bringing in an individual, or rather a humanistic element, you know, skills around empathy. You're going to work with people. You're going to work with people who, you know, the type of work that they can do and have to do is different. And so although you might be the individual in charge of calling the shots, you must be able to have empathy. You must be able to lead teams and multidisciplinary teams. And so it must be from a recognition that of saying that yes, things are changing and the world is changing, but there are certain skills that are now becoming a lot more pronounced, that even as you're learning these technical skills, we must prioritize and learn some of these softer skills, as people would call them, and learn them meaningfully. One of the things that I did about 10 years ago, in fact, not 10 years ago, particularly when I started employment and went into the workplace, I identified public speaking as a key skill for the future. And I mean, it's really set me apart. And because I invested in it, I have been reaping the benefits. And one last thing I'll put to it is to say, you know, there's this quotation about how there are three kinds of people in the world. There are people who make things happen, there are people who watch things happen, and there are people who wonder what happened. And if we do not engage the importance of these human skills and human touch elements, as we would call them, we might be shocked where people prioritize maybe just a computer doing a lot of things that it shouldn't be doing, just because we have not been vocal enough, engaging enough to make organizations and the environments we work in recognize the importance of some of these skills. Thank you. We can take another question.
Thank you. Just like to apologize to Sandy there. They had tried to unmute but weren't able to. So you can come up and ask your question now. Thank you.
Good evening, everyone.
Hi,
the question I'd asked, the question I'd asked was, how do you identify someone who has limibility, but also maybe to check within ourselves? Yes, we will have the goal and objective to learn, but how do I know that I am that person who has the ability? What are the traits that
So I didn't hear you at the end.
What are the traits that mark a person with learnability?
All right, yes. So thank you. That's a good question. What are the trades? I mean, that is actually the world we are going in. I can tell you, I was reading a report by LinkedIn Learning, and what they're saying and showing is that they're seeing an increased trend where organizations are investing in methods, mechanisms, and systems that help them measure learning ability. So it is a developing area. It's an area where we are seeing a lot more effort being invested to say, have people learned? How can we see that people are learning? And so I gave one example already about IBM, where IBM has really invested in AI, to use AI in observing their employees' use of different tools, different systems in the IBM environment. And so the ability for an individual to use a particular tool, for example, for increased time, and using AI to observe that, can start giving you the prompts to say, okay, we're seeing these heat maps, and it does suggest to us that this person has learned these skills that are important. But the other way, crude, straightforward example, is to be asking yourself, what are the new skills you have learned? I mean, there's a quote that I might have mentioned or didn't mention. If you know who you were, if you are still the same person and feel the same as you felt last year, I'm paraphrasing it, it's probably because you are not learning. If you're not shocked and embarrassed by who you were last year, that's a sign that you're probably not learning. And so it is an action and proactivity that you can see yourself, that you're being deliberate. You have a learning plan, right? And your learning plan, you are revising and updating it. You have structures and you've designed a way of learning the things that you identified for yourself, and you're actually implementing them. And that's going to be coming through when you reflect. Let's say at the end of the year, like I do, or whatever time frames you do it at, to say, what have I learned? If you realize you've learned nothing, that is clear. It's a clear-cut answer. Now, if you are hiring, you can ask questions that reveal those sort of traits when you engage employees. What have you learned over the last year? What is on your learning plan? Do you even have a learning plan? Those are the sort of questions that are going to help you. What are the latest skills you've developed? What are you seeing as the mega trends that you believe will affect our industry, and why? And what are you doing about it? Thank you.
Thank you, Katlego. Our next question is from Prabashni.
Hi, thank you so much for the opportunity, and such an interesting and inspiring. I feel your passion, Katlego. Amazing passion. Thank you so much. You know, I also have that passion to want to learn. There's so much of information, right? So sometimes I feel that there's so much of information, but because you know, it's the point of saying, okay, is this a skill? Because you're reading it and it's about applying, then it becomes a skill, right? Am I right?
Yes, that's
right.
correct.
So now the thing is, what happens is there's so much. So, you know, you're learning so many different things, and maybe you may not have enough time to apply all of them. So it's the case about prioritizing, but you want to learn so you can become more relevant and multi-skilled. So is it the thing about being multi-skilled? You know, that's the question. About being multi-skilled, or is it about having this one task that, you know, that will keep you going? And what's the easiest way to learn something? You know, I know there's no easy answer, but what is the easiest way to learn something?
Let me share my presentation again, because maybe one of the slides that I skipped might help answer your question. Let me just try that as I do this, right? So let me say from current slide, I'll go back. Thank you for that question, Prabashni. And I can see the passion that you have for learning yourself, and it is really coming through quite a bit. So as I try to get to this slide, prioritizing is important, and it goes into that identifying what is important. Now I'm going to try and do this. Let me share back my screen and let me know if you can see it. Either Nozipo or Prabashni, can you confirm if you can see what I'm sharing?
Yes, I can. Thank you.
Awesome. Now, Malcolm Gladwell in his book Outliers, really popularized the idea of 10,000 hours, right? And sorry, I mean, I normally bring in my points one at a time, but because I'm using it to answer a question, all the points are already there. Look, mastery is great, but oftentimes in our dynamic world, it is less practical. Skills are changing very, very fast. The half time it takes to have relevance of a skill is decreasing. You know, half time or half years, as they would term it. It's basically how long does it take for the skill that you have learned to have value half of what you have today if you learn it today. That is reducing. Skills have to be replaced and replenished, enhanced more frequently. So what does that mean? It means that it becomes important to keep learning something new and not just focusing on a particular area. It used to work many years ago where information was not as available as it is today, where if you wanted to code, you had such big hurdles to jump over of getting course material, of getting the computer that you can even code on 15 years, 20 years ago. It was tough. But today you could even do some coding on your phone. So things are a lot more accessible, meaning that specialist skills that were absolutely valuable many years ago are no longer as important from a specialist standpoint. Now, what I see is that you need to go to a sweet spot, and the sweet spot is to say, you must learn for competence. And then whilst you're doing and learning for competence, you will identify maybe some niche areas and particular aspects and skills that you realize that here, there's a lot more room to develop this area, and that could give you great opportunity going into the future. Then for me, that justifies the effort that you're going to invest into that particular area. As an organization, maybe you realize that doing a particular thing is going to help you into the future. Then you can do a lot more investment in that area, in that niche. Now, in general, outside of that, I believe you want to focus on at least having average competency on key skills and areas that are pertinent to what you do. That becomes a priority. 10,000 hours, I don't have 10,000 hours anymore. If you have kids and you have 10,000 hours, I am concerned. Go home and be with your kids, right? We no longer have 10,000 hours. If you have kids, you probably have 5 hours. And now the last question that you asked, which I'm going to try and answer, I'm going to use what Jack Kaufman has said as just an example. Now, what he said about learning, just a simple framework that he gave is this, and you can watch his video. I'm going to quickly scroll there. There we go. This is what he said in his video. He believes that 20 hours is what it takes to learn anything new. 20 hours. In fact, he demonstrated on stage, it was a TEDx talk. He demonstrated that whilst he went on stage, that was the 20th hour on which, during which period he was learning the ukulele. And he played the ukulele on stage for people who were in the audience. He wasn't too bad, but clearly he learned it. He was actually singing a number of pop songs for a number of years live on stage. And this is the framework that he uses around learning. He says, to learn, you must do the following. Number one, deconstruct the skill. Before you go into it, what is essential to this skill? What are the key aspects and pillars of it? Number two, you must learn enough to self-correct. That means you don't need to know everything before you try. Just know enough to say, okay, if I'm playing and it sounds like this, this is the wrong tune. This is not how this instrument is supposed to sound. Learn enough to self-correct. And that might also mean surround yourself with individuals that are learned in that area, because they can tell you that, Prabhashni, you are on the wrong track. Number three, remove practice barriers. And number four, practice at least 20 hours. So I hope that gives you some practicality to it. And thank you for that question, because it helped me to cover the last 2 slides that I hadn't covered in my presentation. Maybe we can go for one last question. I don't know if we have the time for that.
Thank you, Katlego. I'm not seeing any more questions. I'm not sure if there's anyone who would like to ask another question. There's just a few comments, but no questions, no new questions. Just give it a minute or two. We actually have about a minute left. And yeah, I think we're right on time. Oh, sorry, Benjamin's hand is up. Benjamin,
Mr.
Would you like to
Samuka,
ask
thank you
your
for
question?
joining in. I see a few of my friends have joined in, like Samuka, Benjamin, Martin, Kibam, Kolo. Thank you guys for joining in. Benjamin, do you want to ask a question? And probably I might not have time to answer it, but ask, sir.
Okay, I just want to, first of all, just thank you for a brilliant talk. Very well prepared, very well executed, and a lot of passion. I absolutely love it. Out of interest, I think, and a lot of people must be thinking this, you as a person, what are you right now learning?
Yeah, perfect question. Fantastic question. I have been developing a lot of my learning around technological skills. And that's part of how actually Benjamin, the individual who is just speaking now, Benjamin, is the first guy who probably became aware that this keynote is coming after I gave the talk at Seed. And I told Benjamin, I was like, you know, Benjamin, I asked this question and I really believe that the ability to learn is the most important skill. So for me, that is an important skill that things that I'm learning about, the different technologies, what is going on in those areas, blockchain, Internet of Things, artificial intelligence, data science, machine learning. But then on the other side, also learning things that I'm practically implementing. I've learned a lot about, you know, you are doing this with your company, Zonoto, a financial services company. Check it out, guys. If you are interested, you'll learn a lot from it on Facebook. The page is there. I'm also working on my page, Benjamin. And so I've learned a lot of skills around, you know, curation of videos, making videos effective. I'm learning around Doodly. I'm trying to make videos using Doodly, a lot of editing, a lot of also productionizing live events, right? It's one thing to just take my phone and go live on Facebook, but I've been doing a lot of work to learn how can I make it effective and engaging so I can retain attention and expand knowledge and help people learn from what I'm doing. And then doing a lot of preparation in terms of the work that I do. Beyond that, in my company, we are doing a lot of work from an IFRS 17 standpoint. So if you're working for an insurance company and you have not identified that you need to learn and your organization has not identified that it needs to learn IFRS 17, you need to speak to me and you need to speak to me soon. We can help you do a lot of training on that. And so we've been doing a lot of learning. We have some of the really globally market leading tools and research around IFRS 17 or IFRS 17 if you're from the UK that we can help your organization with, and you can get in touch with me. I have a team and work with a team of really market leaders who I'm learning from. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. I believe that we've come to the end of our session. Thank you for joining. We'll be sending out the link to the video in the next few days so that if you want to refer back to it and see what Katlego was saying and maybe just go through it. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And thank you everyone for tuning in and for staying tuned in. I really have enjoyed being with you and I hope you learned just one thing. Thank you, Nozipo. Thank you to the team.
Thank you, Katlego.
Thank you, guys. Have a great evening.
Thank you,
Awesome.
Sunny.
Enjoy your evenings. Thank you, Mr. Ngubani, for joining. I really appreciate seeing you. It's a pleasure. A lot of my friends joined in. Thank you for coming through, guys. And a lot of the BAs who, you know, followed through on their registration and were part of this. Thank you for coming in. Really enjoyed being with all of you. Loved the engagement in the chat box. It was fantastic. Let's keep chatting. Let's keep talking. Let's keep learning. Learning ability is key. Cheers, everyone, and bye-bye.